1:47 p.m. Empty street. One cop. One target. He had done this before. He knew exactly how to pick them. Alone. Tired. No witnesses. No fight left. The woman in nurse scrubs standing beside her car ticked every box. He reached into his vest, pulled out a bag of narcotics, looked left, looked right, and planted it under her seat. He had framed people before. He had lied under oath before. He had destroyed lives before. And not once had anyone stopped him until tonight. Because what he didn't know was that the exhausted woman he had just handcuffed on the side of that road had spent 8 years making life-and-death decisions under enemy fire. 3 combat tours. Dozens of soldiers brought back from the edge of death by her hands. She had faced worse enemies than a corrupt small-town cop. And the moment those cuffs clicked shut, she started planning exactly how to destroy him. He thought he had picked easy prey. He had just made the worst mistake of his life. Stay with me, because 45 minutes later, his career was over. And that was just the beginning. Drop a comment. Tell me what city you're watching from. Her name was Elena Kovac, and she was running on fumes. 16 straight hours in the trauma unit at Riverside General Hospital. 2 overdoses, 3 car accidents, 1 gunshot victim who coded twice before she brought him back. Her scrubs were marked with someone else's blood. Her shoulders ached from hours of compressions and procedures and the particular weight of holding life together with her bare hands. All she wanted was a hot shower and 6 hours of silence. She never got either. The red and blue lights exploded in her rearview mirror without warning. Elena's pulse didn't spike. Her hands didn't shake. She checked her speedometer. 32 in a 35 zone. She eased the car to the curb and kept her hands visible on the wheel. She had been pulled over 3 times in her life, all minor, all resolved with a warning. Whatever this was, it would be quick. The officer took his time approaching her window. She watched him in the side mirror, stocky build, one hand resting on his weapon like this was a felony stop instead of a tired nurse heading home. When he finally reached her door, his flashlight hit her face like an interrogation lamp. License and registration. No greeting. No explanation. Just a flat command from a man who expected instant compliance. Elena kept her hands on the wheel. "May I ask why you pulled me over?" The beam moved down to her scrubs, then back to her face. License and registration. Now. She had dealt with aggressive personalities before. Drunk patients, panicked families, who had forgotten how to trust anyone in uniform. The key was always the same. Stay calm. Stay professional. Don't escalate. "I'm reaching for my wallet. It's in the bag on the passenger seat." "Stop. Step out of the vehicle." That was when the first real unease moved through her. This wasn't standard procedure. Not even close. "Officer, out. Now." She stepped out, legs stiff from the long shift, body screaming for rest it wasn't going to get. The officer, his nameplate read Ramsey, positioned himself at an angle that pinned her between her open door and the car frame. Up close, she could see the assessment in his eyes, the way he was sizing her up, the way a predator sizes up prey. She had seen that look before, in forward operating bases, in field hospitals, on the faces of men who enjoyed having power over people who couldn't fight back. "What's your name?" "Elena Kovac. I'm a registered nurse at Riverside General. I just finished my shift. I'm heading home." Kovac. He drew out the syllables like he was tasting something unpleasant. "That foreign?" "My father's family is from Croatia. I was born in Pittsburgh." "You seem nervous?" "I'm not nervous. I'm tired. It's been a long shift." Ramsey's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Long shift doing what?" "Lives." Something in her tone must have landed wrong, because his expression hardened. You've got a smart mouth for someone who's about to have a very bad night. The threat hung in the air between them, naked, ugly. Elena's military training kicked in automatically. Assess the situation. Identify the threat level. Calculate your options. She was alone on a dark street with a cop who had clearly decided she was a problem before he even turned on his lights. No witnesses, no backup, no one coming. Except, her eyes moved to the house across the street. A small security camera mounted under the eave, lens pointed directly at the roadway. Ramsey caught the glance. His jaw tightened. Turn around, hands on the vehicle. Am I under arrest? You will be if you don't shut your mouth. Elena turned, placed her palms flat on the Honda's roof, and focused on her breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow and controlled. The same technique she had used when the mortars started falling on her field hospital in Kandahar. The same technique she used when she was elbow-deep in a soldier's chest cavity, trying to clamp a torn artery while the tent walls shook from nearby explosions. Ramsey's hands moved over her in a search that had nothing to do with looking for weapons. She counted backwards from 100. Then she heard him moving toward her car. "What are you doing?" "Searching your vehicle. I've got reasonable suspicion. That's all I need." Elena listened to the sounds behind her. The creak of her car door. The deliberate rustle of someone moving things around in her front seat. She had worked enough trauma cases to know what a legitimate search sounded like. This wasn't it. This was theater. This was someone constructing a story. "Well, well, well." Ramsey's voice dripped with false surprise. "What do we have here?" She turned just enough to see him straightening up from her passenger seat, holding a clear plastic bag filled with white powder. Her stomach dropped. "That's not mine. They always say that." He held the bag up to his flashlight, examined it with exaggerated care. "Looks like cocaine. Maybe fentanyl. Either way, that's a felony trafficking charge. You're under arrest." The world tilted slightly. Elena had survived 3 combat tours, had held dying men while bullets cracked overhead, had made life-and-death decisions in split seconds with shrapnel falling around her. But nothing had prepared her for the surreal horror of watching a police officer frame her for a crime in the middle of a quiet street. "That bag was not in my car." "Sure it wasn't, and we both know it." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, or the first hint of uncertainty. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the arrogant confidence of a man who had done this before and gotten away with it. "Hands behind your back." The cuffs bit into her wrists. Cold metal against skin that still smelled faintly of hospital antiseptic. Ramsey walked her to his cruiser, with one hand gripped tight on her upper arm. Shoved her into the back seat hard enough to make her head bounce off the doorframe. She settled against the seat, closed her eyes, and took stock. She was a decorated combat veteran with 3 tours and an active security clearance. She had never been arrested, never been accused of any crime. She had an impeccable record at the hospital. And she had something else. Something Ramsey had completely missed. She opened her eyes and looked at her dashboard. The small camera she had installed 6 months ago after a colleague was carjacked in the hospital parking lot. A dash cam, running on motion sensors, uploading automatically to cloud storage every time the car connected to Wi-Fi. It had recorded everything. Ramsey had made his first mistake when he assumed she was too scared to fight back. He had made his second when he didn't check for cameras. She wondered how many more mistakes he would make before this was over. At the booking desk, she stood with her spine straight and her shoulders back. The posture drilled into her during basic training and reinforced through 8 years of standing at attention in front of superior officers. The desk sergeant barely looked up as Ramsey announced the charges. Felony trafficking. M. Found 2 kilos in her vehicle. M. Routine traffic stop. Then the sergeant's eyes dropped to the ID badge still clipped to her chest. The small American flag pin. The gold star indicating veteran status. Name? He asked her directly, cutting across Ramsey's voice like a blade. Elena looked at the sergeant and spoke clearly. Major Elena Kovac, United States Army Reserve, retired. Currently employed as a trauma nurse at Riverside General Hospital. She paused. Let it land. I served 3 combat tours as a forward surgical team leader. 2 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. I separated from active duty with an honorable discharge. I have an active security clearance through the Department of Defense. I have never been arrested, never been accused of any crime. She kept her voice completely flat, completely professional. Just facts, laid out like evidence at a court-martial. And I have a dash cam that recorded everything that happened on that street tonight. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. The sergeant's expression shifted from bored to something much more alert. And Ramsey went very still. I also want to request that you contact my commanding officer at Fort Bragg and notify her of my detention. Protocol requires notification within 2 hours for anyone holding active clearance. The sergeant's pen had stopped moving. He stared at her for a long moment, then looked at Ramsey, and something passed between them that Elena couldn't quite read, but she could feel it. The first crack in a wall Ramsey had been building for years. Stay with me. Morning. That crack becomes a flood. The holding cell was concrete and cold, and smelled like other people's fear. Elena sat on the metal bench and did what she always did in impossible situations. She made a plan. Ramsey had planted evidence. That much was clear. But he had been sloppy, which meant either he was arrogantly stupid, or he had done this so many times he had stopped being careful. The dashcam footage would prove what happened. The security camera across the street was a second source. She needed a lawyer who understood what those 2 things meant. She needed one fast. The public defender arrived at midnight, young, exhausted. A woman named Sarah Chen, who looked like she had been pulled from bed and wasn't happy about it. She sat down across from Elena and opened a file that was mostly empty. They're charging you with felony drug trafficking, resisting arrest, and obstruction. You're looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted. I didn't do any of those things. That's what everyone says. Sarah pulled out a legal pad. Look, if they found drugs in your car, your best bet is a plea deal. First offense, cooperate with prosecutors, maybe out in 5 to 7 years. Elena leaned forward. Her voice dropped to the tone she used on soldiers about to make catastrophically stupid decisions. Miss Chen, I need you to listen very carefully. Officer Ramsey planted that evidence. I watched him do it. And I have video proof. Video proof. Dashcam. Installed 6 months ago. Motion activated. Automatic cloud backup. It captured everything. Where is it now? Still in my car. Unless Ramsey found it. But there's also a residential camera across the street from where I was stopped. 847 Maple Street. I saw it when I was standing outside. Sarah was writing fast now, her earlier exhaustion replaced by something that looked almost like real interest. If you've got video of a cop planting drugs, then I've got video of a police officer committing multiple felonies. Evidence tampering, perjury, civil rights violations. Elena kept her voice level, and if he has done this before, which I strongly suspect he has, then there is a pattern of misconduct that goes way beyond my case. Sarah sat back, reassessing. You're not what I expected. No, I imagine I'm not. They moved her to a private cell after the interview. Elena took that as a sign that someone higher up the chain had started asking questions. She did push-ups on the concrete floor until her arms shook, then crunches, then wall sits. Anything to burn off the adrenaline and keep her mind sharp. At 7:30 the next morning, Sarah Chen returned. She wasn't alone. The man who walked in behind her was in his late 50s. Silver hair, a jaw like a snowplow. The kind of presence that made people stand up straighter without being told. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Elena's car. When his eyes met hers across the interview room, she saw instant recognition. Not of her specifically, but of what she was. Another soldier, someone who had been in it and come out the other side. Major Kovac. He extended his hand. I'm Marcus Blackwell, criminal defense attorney. I'm here because Colonel Hendricks called me at 5 this morning and told me one of her best combat medics had been framed by a dirty cop. He sat down with the easy confidence of someone who had walked into worse rooms and walked out victorious. Marines, 20 years before law school, and before you ask, yes, I'm taking your case, and no, you don't need to worry about fees. The colonel is calling in a favor. Elena felt something she hadn't felt since the handcuffs went on. Back up. Tell me everything, Blackwell said. Don't leave anything out. She told him everything. The stop without cause. Ramsey's aggression. The planted bag. The camera she had seen across the street. The dash cam Ramsey never checked. Blackwell listened without interrupting, his expression darkening with each detail. When she finished, he pulled out his phone and made a single call. Jack, it's Marcus. I need you at 847 Maple Street, right now. There's a residential security camera, and I need that footage before someone makes it disappear. He hung up, looked at her. Jack's a former FBI investigator. If that footage exists, he'll get it. Now. Your dash cam. Does it upload to cloud storage? Automatic backup. Every time the car connects to Wi-Fi. Login credentials. Write them down. He slid a legal pad across the table. I'm pulling everything from your account before anyone else thinks to look. And I'm filing an emergency motion for your release today. You're a decorated combat veteran with no criminal history and zero flight risk. There is no legal justification for holding you. The arraignment happened that afternoon. Elena stood before the judge flanked by Blackwell on one side and Sarah Chen on the other. The prosecutor outlined the charges with mechanical precision. Blackwell waited, then rose to his feet with the timing of a man who had been planning this moment since he walked into the building. Your Honor, the defense moves for immediate dismissal. The evidence was obtained through an illegal search, and there is credible reason to believe the narcotics were planted by the arresting officer. The courtroom erupted in whispers. We have video evidence, dashcam footage from Major Kovac's vehicle that clearly shows Officer Derek Ramsey removing a plastic bag from his own vest and placing it inside the defendant's car. We also have corroborating footage from a residential security camera at the scene. Both pieces of evidence are currently being preserved through emergency court order. The judge leaned forward, iron gray hair, eyes that had seen every trick in the book. She looked at Elena directly. Major Kovac, is it true you served 3 combat tours? Yes, Your Honor. 2 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, with a forward surgical team. The judge studied her for a long moment, then looked at the prosecutor, then at Ramsey sitting in the gallery with his jaw set and his hands very still in his lap. Bail is set at $5,000. She brought her gavel down. And I want that video evidence submitted to this court within 72 hours. If it shows what counsel claims, we are going to have a very different conversation about these charges. Elena walked out into late afternoon sunlight, with an ankle monitor locked around her leg. Her car impounded. Her scrubs marked as evidence, but free. Then her phone rang. Brenda. She answered. Turn on Channel 7, right now. A reporter stood outside Riverside General. Microphone raised, expression grave. Tonight we're trying to piece together who Elena Kovac really is, According to our investigation, Morgan has worked at multiple hospitals, and sources suggest a history of behavioral issues stemming from combat-related trauma. Elena watched her own driver's license photo appear on screen. Tired, vaguely hostile. Beside footage of the police station and stock images of cocaine bags that looked nothing like what Ramsey had planted. Her phone buzzed. Blackwell. They leaked first. Classic dirty cop playbook. Poison the jury pool. Plant the seed of doubt before the evidence comes out. What do? We fight back. Press conference tomorrow, 11 a.m., my office. You stand next to me and we tell your story. Service record, clean history, everything, and then we release the dashcam footage. Won't that compromise the case? They leaked first, which means they're playing dirty. We respond with the truth. By noon tomorrow, every news outlet in this state is going to know that a Millerton cop framed a decorated combat veteran. That night alone in a hotel room Blackwell had booked for her, Elena sat on the edge of the bed and read the comment sections on the news stories about her arrest. She made herself read every single one. Not because they were true, but because she needed to understand exactly what she was up against. They always say it wasn't theirs. If she has PTSD, she shouldn't be near patients. Cops don't just make this stuff up. She looks guilty in that photo. You can always tell. She closed the browser, set the phone face down, and thought about every soldier she had ever treated in a field hospital while the world tried to kill them both. None of them had quit. Neither would she. Stay with me, because what gets discovered in Ramsey's storage unit changes everything. A press conference was at 11. Elena arrived at Blackwell's office at 10:30 in dark slacks and a blazer that fit well enough. No makeup to hide behind, no uniform to stand behind, just the truth and the people willing to stand next to her while she told it. Blackwell positioned her at the podium, with the American flag on one side and the Pennsylvania state flag on the other. The optics were deliberate. This was a patriot being persecuted, not a criminal being prosecuted. Thank you for coming. Blackwell's voice carried the easy authority of someone who had done this 100 times. My name is Marcus Blackwell. I'm representing Major Elena Kovacs in what I can only describe as one of the most egregious cases of police misconduct I have encountered in 30 years of practicing law. He outlined the facts, the stop without cause, the illegal search, the planted evidence. Then the lights dimmed, and the footage played. The room went completely silent. Grainy dashcam footage showing Ramsey approaching her window. The confrontation, the order to step out, and then the critical moment. Ramsey's hand disappearing inside his tactical vest, emerging with a clear plastic bag. The glance left, the glance right, the deliberate placement under the seat, the theatrical pause before his so-called discovery. Then the second video, the residential security camera, a different angle, catching everything the dashcam missed. Ramsey's hand reaching into his vest, the bag emerging, the plant, the lie. When the lights came back up, reporters were already typing, phones rising, the story accelerating beyond anyone's control. Elena stepped to the podium. She hadn't prepared a speech. She never did. The best statements were the honest ones. My name is Elena Kovacs. I spent 8 years in the United States Army as a combat medic and surgical nurse. I saved lives under fire. I earned commendations for valor. I came home and continued serving my community as a trauma nurse. She paused. Officer Derek Ramsey framed me because he thought I was easy prey, a woman driving alone at night, too tired to fight back, no witnesses to contradict his story. He was wrong, but I'm standing here today because I had resources most people don't have: cameras, connections, the ability to hire excellent legal representation. The people he framed before me didn't have those advantages. They're sitting in prison cells right now serving time for his crimes. And that is what this is really about. Not clearing my name, but but making sure his other victims get justice too. The questions came fast. Elena answered what she could, deflected what would compromise the case. By the time they wrapped up 40 minutes later, the story had gone viral. Local news first, then regional, then national outlets smelling blood in the water. Blackwell's investigator, Morrison, had been working through Ramsey's arrest records since the night before. He called during the drive back from the press conference. "I've found 6 cases in the past 3 years that match the pattern. Traffic stops for minor violations escalating to drug possession charges. All of them claim the drugs were planted. All of them were convicted." Elena felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. 6 people. That we know of. Find them. Already working on it. There's one still in Millerton. Man named Marcus Webb. Out on parole. If he'll talk, he'll talk. I'll make sure of it. Marcus Webb was sitting in a safe house Morrison used for witnesses. A man in his late 20s, haunted eyes, the kind of tension in his shoulders that spoke of too many nights sleeping in cells. He looked up when Elena walked in. "You're the nurse, Elena Kovac, and you're Marcus Webb. 3 years in state prison for a crime you didn't commit." He laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. 3 years gone because that cop decided I fit the profile. You know what the worst part was? Nobody believed me. Not my lawyer, not the judge, not even my own mother. Everyone just assumed I was lying because that's what criminals do. He studied her. Why? Because I watched him do it to me. Because I found 5 other people he did it to. And because I think there are more. She told him what they had. The footage. The evidence. The pattern. He listened without moving. Then, "What do you want from me?" "I want you to have a choice. You can walk away right now. Go back to your life. Focus on your parole. Nobody would blame you. Or you can help me stop him from doing this to anyone else." Webb looked at his hands. "They've already called me. Twice today. Told me if I talk, my parole gets violated. Said I'll be back inside by the end of the week." "Who called?" "Didn't give names. But I recognized the voice. Another cop from the department. Ramsey's not working alone." Elena kept her voice steady. "I know. Which is exactly why we can't stop now." She leaned forward. "Last time you were alone. This time you have video evidence, corroborating testimony, physical proof, and a decorated combat veteran standing next to you, calling Ramsey a liar. This time is different." A long moment. Something shifting behind his eyes. "Okay, I'll do it. Just tell me the truth. If this goes sideways, then I'll be right there with you. Because if Ramsey wins, I'm going to prison too. We're in this together now." The storage unit was discovered at dawn. Federal warrant. Paradise Storage. Unit 237. Leased under a fake name. The lock clicked open. The door rolled up. And what was inside made Torres, the FBI agent leading the investigation, go completely still. Plastic storage bins lined every wall, each one labeled with dates and case numbers. Torres opened the nearest bin. Bags of narcotics, pre-packaged, identical to the bag planted in Elena's car. Dozens of them. The next bin contained cash. Stacks of bills rubber-banded together with handwritten notes about amounts and dates. The bin after that held burner phones. Then more drugs. Then a laptop wrapped in plastic. "Sweet Jesus," Morrison breathed. Torres moved along the rows, his face growing darker with every bin he opened. He's been running his own evidence-planting operation. This isn't just corruption. This is a full-scale criminal enterprise inside a police department. Elena walked the rows slowly, each bin representing a life destroyed. A person sitting in a cell for a crime they didn't commit. A family torn apart by a cop who decided he was above the law. She stopped at a bin labeled with dates from 3 years ago. The first evidence bag had a case number she recognized from Morrison's research. Marcus Webb's arrest. She called to him. He had been standing near the entrance, looking at the bins, like they were bombs. He approached slowly. Elena held up the bag. "This is from your case. The drugs they said you were carrying. Ramsey planted them, then kept them here, while you served 3 years for his crime." Webb took the bag with shaking hands, stared at the case number written in permanent marker. "All this time I told everyone it wasn't mine. I told my lawyer, my mother, the judge. Nobody believed me." His voice broke. "And this was sitting here the whole time." By noon, news vans were outside Millerton Police Department. By 2 p.m., the hospital board called an emergency meeting. By 4 p.m., Ramsey's lawyer arrived. Expensive suit, leather briefcase, the kind of attorney who charged $1,000 an hour to make problems disappear. He was 6 hours too late. The arrest happened at 6:17 p.m. Federal charges: healthcare fraud, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, civil rights violations. The FBI agent read him his rights, while airport police secured his hands behind his back with steel handcuffs that clicked shut with a finality that echoed through the small room. They walked him out through the station, past colleagues who looked away, past the desk sergeant who had watched Elena stand straight and speak clearly the night Ramsey brought her in. Everything he thought would protect him forever. His head was down, his expensive composure completely gone, leaving only a man who had gambled everything on other people's silence, and lost. Elena watched it on live television from Blackwell's office. Blackwell stood beside her. "He's not getting out of this one." She said nothing. She was thinking about the storage unit, about the 43 bins, about 43 people whose lives had been deliberately and systematically destroyed. Then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A single line. "We know where you are. Time to come home." She showed it to Blackwell. He read it twice. "That's not Ramsey. He's in custody. Someone else is running this operation." Elena looked at the message one more time. Then she looked up at the television, where Ramsey's arrest was playing on loop. "Then we find out who." The message led them to Lawrence Castellano. It took Morrison 48 hours of financial forensics to connect the dots. Offshore accounts, shell companies, payments to corrupt officers across 3 counties disguised as consulting fees. But the thread that unraveled everything was the real estate. Every neighborhood Ramsey had targeted with mass drug arrests, Castellano had purchased properties there within 6 months. Every community destabilized by false convictions, Castellano had developed those blocks at below-market prices. He hadn't just been protecting dirty cops, he had been paying for them, weaponizing law enforcement to clear out communities so he could rebuild them for profit. He used police corruption as a business strategy, Torres said when he presented the findings. 43 wrongful convictions, hundreds of families displaced, entire neighborhoods destroyed, all to increase his profit margins. Elena sat with that for a long time. The trap was Torres's idea. Make Elena visible. Give Castellano a target he couldn't resist. She would give a talk at Riverside General Hospital. Widely publicized, minimal visible security, an apparently easy opportunity for a desperate man to solve his problem permanently. In reality, the hospital would be saturated with federal agents. Every entrance monitored, every person identified, the audience of nursing students entirely replaced by undercover FBI. Blackwell called it insane. Elena called it thorough. The night of the event she arrived at the hospital at 5:30. Torres met her in the converted command center. Castellano made contact with a contractor named Vincent Cross. Dishonorable discharge. Known associate of organized crime. He arrived in Millerton 4 hours ago. Paid cash. He's here. He's preparing. Then so are we. Elena took the platform at 7 p.m. She spoke about maintaining composure under pressure. about making decisions in crisis situations, about holding your values when systems fail. Her voice was steady. Her hands were still. 60 feet away, Vincent Cross settled into position in a storage closet, with a rifle assembled and a clear sightline through a narrow window to the woman on the platform. He took a breath, steadied his aim, began the slow, deliberate squeeze every professional shooter learns. Torres gave the signal. Flashbang grenades detonated in the storage closet. Blinding light, concussive force, 2 seconds of disorientation. That was all it took. Tactical agents breached the door. Cross tried to swing the rifle. 3 agents hit him simultaneously. He went down. The rifle clattered away. Handcuffs clicked into place. Target secured. No shots fired. Elena didn't break stride in her presentation. She finished her thought about maintaining composure, then looked directly at the camera recording everything. Sometimes the pressure comes from external threats. Sometimes it comes from people who think they can intimidate you into silence. The key is remembering that fear is just information, data about a threat. That requires a response. And the best response is always to keep moving forward. Keep fighting for what's right, and refuse to let someone else's violence define your story. She smiled slightly, knowing that somewhere in this city, Lawrence Castellano was watching this feed, and realizing his $50,000 investment in murder had just bought him a life sentence in federal prison. The arrest of Cross happened at 7:23 p.m. The arrest of Castellano happened at 8:15 p.m. FBI agents entering his penthouse office with weapons drawn, finding him surrounded by lawyers who immediately began negotiating surrender terms. He had built an empire on the belief that money could buy anything, including the corruption of law enforcement, the destruction of communities, and the murder of anyone who threatened his operation. He was about to learn the price of that belief. The trial lasted 7 weeks. Elena testified for 3 days. Marcus Webb gave testimony so devastating that 3 jurors were seen wiping their eyes. Diana Ramsey, who had come forward with recordings of her husband admitting everything, testified about the confessions she had carried alone for years. Cross testified about the 6 people he had killed on Castellano's orders, 6 people who had stood in the way of a business interest and been quietly removed. By the time the prosecution rested, the courtroom was silent, with the weight of accumulated horror. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the foreman looked directly at Castellano as he read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. All. 6 life sentences for the murders. 240 years for racketeering and corruption charges. Old Lawrence Castellano would die in federal prison. His empire dismantled. His name synonymous with corruption. As marshals led him away, he looked back at Elena one final time. She met his gaze without expression, and she watched him understand what Derek Ramsey had learned too late, that the woman he dismissed as a convenient problem to be eliminated was the force that destroyed everything he built. Then he was gone. Derek Ramsey was sentenced 3 weeks before Castellano. 45 years, federal prison, no parole. The judge, the same woman who had set Elena's bail, and watched the dashcam footage with iron-gray eyes and an unreadable expression, had looked at Ramsey across the courtroom and said 6 words that ended his career, his freedom, and his legacy. You betrayed everything this stands for. Then she brought the gavel down. The settlement came from the city of Millerton, $28 million, no confidentiality agreement, no requirement to protect anyone's reputation, and binding reforms that would change how the department operated for the next decade. Mandatory body cameras that couldn't be turned off, independent oversight boards with real investigative power, automatic review of every drug conviction from a traffic stop. Blackwell called her when the city accepted the terms. They folded. Complete surrender. Elena was standing in the hospital parking lot at the end of a shift. Back in Scrubs, back in the trauma unit, back where she belonged. Good. That's all you've got? Good. What else is there to say? We won. Now we build. Launched 6 weeks after the settlement. Every dollar directed toward what she had promised. Legal defense for people who couldn't afford to fight back. Investigative support for exposing corrupt officers. Victim advocacy for everyone whose life had been deliberately destroyed by people who wore a badge. Marcus Webb became the fund's director of victim outreach, using his own story to reach people who had been failed by the same system he had survived. Morrison joined as lead investigator. Sarah Chen, the young public defender who had almost advised Elena to take a plea deal, became the fund's senior legal director. Growing into the lawyer the system had never quite allowed her to be. 273 wrongful convictions were overturned in the 18 months following Ramsey's arrest. 273 people who had told the truth and been called liars, who had sat in cells, serving time for crimes they didn't commit, who had lost years and jobs and families and futures. Given back what had been taken. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to matter. On the 1-year anniversary of her arrest, Elena stood at a podium at Riverside General Hospital. The same room, the same platform, where Vincent Cross had aimed a rifle at her heart and found something he couldn't shoot through. She looked out at 200 people, survivors, advocates, families, people who had been broken by injustice and chosen to become the force that prevented others from being similarly destroyed. I want to tell you about the moment this all started. Her voice carried to every corner of the room. Not the night Ramsey pulled me over. That was just the catalyst I made while standing beside my car, in handcuffs, watching him plant evidence. I had a choice. Accept what was happening, take a plea deal, move on, try to forget, or fight back with everything I had. She paused. Fighting back wasn't rational. The odds were against me. I was alone, facing a corrupt cop backed by an entire department. Any reasonable person would have said, cut your losses. But I learned something in combat that served me well in this battle. Sometimes the smart play is the coward's play. Sometimes you have to be willing to risk everything to stand for what's right. She looked directly into the cameras. So my message to anyone facing injustice right now: fight back. Find your evidence. Build your case. Connect with people who believe you. And never, ever, let someone else's corruption become your shame. You are not what they accuse you of. You are not the lie they tell about you. You are the truth you carry inside. And that truth is stronger than any badge, any amount of money, any corrupt system. She let that land. Derek Ramsey is serving 45 years. Lawrence Castellano is serving 6 life sentences. 273 innocent people are free. And it all started because one tired nurse refused to accept being framed. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. When it finally died down, Elena stepped away from the podium and into the crowd, shaking hands, hugging survivors, accepting thanks she didn't feel she'd earned, but that clearly mattered to the people giving it. Torres found her near the end of the evening. Final update: 42 corrupt officers arrested across 6 states. The network is completely dismantled. They're never putting it back together. And the victims? Still reviewing cases. Could be another 100 we haven't found yet, but we're looking, and we're finding them. Elena raised her glass. To justice then. Messy and slow, and always too late, but still better than the alternative. To justice, Torres echoed, and to the woman who refused to let corruption win. If this story moved you today, hit that like button right now, and drop a comment below. Tell me the one moment that got you the most. Was it when she looked at that dash cam in the back of his cruiser and started building her case? Was it when the storage unit doors rolled open and 43 bins told the truth that 43 people had been screaming for years? Or was it that final verdict? Guilty on all counts. Tell me below. And if you want more stories about people who refused to break when everything tried to break them, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the next story is already waiting.